There's a moment when you're alone on a dark highway, fuel gauge hovering near empty, that every gas station becomes both salvation and potential trap. The fluorescent lights cutting through endless darkness, the hum of refrigeration units breaking the desert silence, the promise of safety that might be hiding something far more sinister. I was pulling into an empty gas station at 2:30 in the morning, the only source of light for miles along the desolate stretch of Interstate 40, cutting through the New Mexico desert. My fuel gauge was dangerously close to empty, and this rundown station with its cracked concrete and faded signage was my only option before the next town, still 60 miles away. As I stepped out of my car, the silence felt oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of aging refrigeration units and the soft whistle of wind through desert scrub. But as I reached for the gas pump, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Fresh tire tracks in the dust around the pumps, and the unmistakable impression of footprints leading from a car to the station's darkened convenience store, then back again. Someone had been here recently, but there were no other vehicles in sight, and the store appeared completely abandoned. My name is Jake. I'm a long-haul trucker with 15 years of experience, and that night taught me that gas stations, those beacons of safety along our highways, can become hunting grounds for predators who understand that desperate travelers will stop anywhere when their tank hits empty. If you've ever felt watched while pumping gas late at night, noticed something off about a station's employees, or experienced that primitive instinct screaming at you to get back in your car and drive away, hit that like button right now. Because tonight I'm sharing 3 true accounts that will shatter everything you believe about roadside safety. These aren't urban legends designed to scare travelers. These are real experiences from real people who discovered that when you're alone on a dark highway, miles from help, even the most ordinary stops can turn into nightmares that will haunt you for the rest of your life. Trust me. By the end of these stories, you'll understand why some travelers never stop at certain gas stations again, and why the most dangerous predators are often the ones wearing employee uniforms and friendly smiles. Maria thought she knew every safe stop along the route from Albuquerque to Denver. As a nurse who'd driven this stretch dozens of times, she had her routine down to a science. Specific gas stations where she felt comfortable as a woman traveling alone, timing calculated to arrive home before her next hospital shift. The 6-hour drive through high desert landscape was usually peaceful, meditative even, especially during night hours when traffic was lighter and temperatures more comfortable. But on this particular October night, Maria's carefully planned route fell apart. Her usual gas stations were either closed for renovation or had run out of fuel due to supply chain issues affecting rural areas throughout the Southwest. As her fuel gauge approached empty near Las Vegas, New Mexico, Maria was forced to stop at a station she'd never used before, a rundown independent operation that looked frozen in the 1980s. The station sat 5 miles off the main highway, accessible only by a narrow 2-lane road winding through rocky hills and sparse vegetation that created an isolated, almost abandoned feeling even during daylight. The building itself was a patchwork of different construction eras, with minimal and uneven exterior lighting, creating pools of harsh illumination separated by deep shadows that made it impossible to see the entire property clearly. Maria's first instinct was to keep driving, but her fuel situation was critical. The next confirmed gas station was more than 40 miles away on completely dark, isolated roads. She decided to stop, planning to pump gas quickly and get back on the road as fast as possible. As Maria pulled up to the pump island, she noticed the station appeared open, lights on in the convenience store, the familiar glow of refrigerated beverage cases visible through windows, but there were no other customers visible, and she couldn't see any employees moving around inside. The silence was unsettling, broken only by electrical equipment humming and the occasional creak of metal signs moving in desert wind. While her gas pumped, Maria kept her keys in hand and purse securely closed, maintaining the awareness that had become second nature during years of traveling alone as a healthcare worker with irregular schedules. That's when she noticed movement inside the convenience store that made her blood run cold. Through the windows, she could see what appeared to be several people moving around inside, but their movements were wrong, strange, coordinated in a way that didn't match normal customer or employee behavior. The figures seemed to be moving in patterns, walking back and forth between aisles in synchronized movements that suggested organized activity rather than shopping or stocking shelves. Maria couldn't make out details about the people inside, but their behavior triggered every instinct for caution and self-protection her nursing experience had taught her. As her tank filled and she prepared to leave, one of the figures emerged from the store and began walking toward her pump island. A middle-aged man in work clothes that might have indicated employee status, but his approach was deliberate and focused in a way that made Maria feel like prey being stalked rather than a customer being assisted. The man's facial expression was blank, emotionless. He moved with mechanical precision that seemed rehearsed rather than natural. Maria's medical training had taught her to read body language and emotional states, and everything about this man's approach screamed danger. Smash that subscribe button and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt that primal terror when someone's approach feels predatory rather than helpful. Because what happened next proved that Maria's instincts were trying to save her life. Maria quickly completed her purchase using Pay at Pump, avoiding any need to interact with the store or give the approaching man reason to engage her. But as she replaced the fuel nozzle and prepared to get back in her car, the man positioned himself between Maria and her driver's side door, effectively blocking her access to her vehicle. His positioning was clearly intentional. His continued blank expression suggested he was following some predetermined plan rather than responding to normal social cues that would govern customer service interaction. The man began speaking in a monotone voice, asking invasive questions about her travel plans, destination, and whether she was traveling alone. His questions were inappropriate and clearly designed to gather information for harmful purposes rather than providing assistance. Maria's healthcare training had taught her to recognize predatory behavior and manipulation tactics, and she immediately understood she was being assessed as a potential victim by someone with experience targeting vulnerable travelers. Maria refused to answer and attempted to move around him to reach her car door. But he shifted position to continue blocking her access while maintaining the pretense of friendly conversation. During this interaction, Maria noticed additional figures had emerged from the convenience store and were positioning themselves around the pump area. She was being surrounded by multiple people whose intentions were clearly hostile. The coordinated nature of their positioning confirmed her suspicion that she'd encountered an organized group using the gas station as a base for targeting and victimizing travelers. Maria's medical training kicked in. She activated her car's panic alarm, creating loud, attention-getting sound that disrupted the group's coordinated approach and gave her the opportunity to push past the man blocking her door. She immediately locked her doors and started her engine. But as she attempted to drive away, she discovered one of the group members had positioned a vehicle to block her exit. The situation escalated as group members began approaching her car more aggressively, some attempting to open her doors while others prevented her from driving away. Maria realized she was trapped in a carefully orchestrated situation designed to isolate and control travelers who stopped at the station. The group's coordination and experience suggested they had successfully victimized other travelers using similar tactics. Maria's escape required using her car as a weapon, carefully maneuvering to push the blocking vehicle out of the way, while avoiding serious injury to the people surrounding her. Her nursing background had taught her to remain calm under pressure and make quick decisions in life-threatening situations, skills that proved essential for escaping without becoming a victim of whatever the group had planned. She drove directly to the nearest police station, more than 30 miles away, and reported the incident to law enforcement officers familiar with similar complaints about the isolated gas station. The investigation revealed the station had been the site of multiple disappearances and assaults over several years, with a pattern of travelers stopping for fuel and never reaching their intended destinations. The station was being used as a front for a criminal organization specializing in targeting lone travelers, particularly women, who could be isolated and victimized without immediate detection. The group's methods were sophisticated and well-practiced, suggesting they'd been operating for an extended period and had successfully avoided law enforcement attention by choosing victims whose disappearances might not be immediately noticed or investigated. But if you think organized criminal groups represent the worst danger at isolated gas stations, wait until you hear what David encountered on a detour through rural Colorado. Because sometimes the most terrifying predators are the ones who've perfected the art of appearing like normal travelers while systematically hunting for victims they can make disappear without a trace. David was an experienced road trip driver making his familiar journey from university in Colorado to his family home in Texas for Thanksgiving break. He'd made this drive multiple times and knew the best routes, reliable gas stations, and safe stopping points. The 8-hour journey was usually straightforward, timed to arrive home for dinner with his family. But on this trip, road construction forced David onto a detour through an area he'd never traveled before. The detour added 50 miles and took him through even more isolated terrain, with longer distances between services and fewer options for fuel stops. His fuel gauge was getting low as he approached. What GPS indicated was the only gas station for the next 60 miles, a small independent operation in a tiny town that barely appeared on maps. The station sat at the intersection of two rural highways, surrounded by empty fields and distant mountains that created complete isolation from civilization. The building was old but appeared well-maintained, with clean pump islands and a convenience store that looked like it served basic needs of local residents and passing travelers. David felt relieved to find a functioning gas station in such a remote location. He pulled up to the pumps, planning to fill his tank, grab snacks, and continue his journey home. As David began pumping gas, he noticed the station had an unusual number of customers for such a remote location. Several other vehicles were at pump islands and in the parking area, with people moving around inside the convenience store. Initially, David was pleased to see other travelers, as it suggested the station was legitimate and safe. But as he observed the other customers more carefully, he began to notice their behavior was strange and inconsistent with normal gas station activities. The other customers weren't actually pumping gas or making purchases. Instead, they seemed to be loitering around the property, standing near vehicles or walking around pump areas without apparent purpose. The people weren't interacting with each other like normal travelers might, and they weren't showing signs of being in a hurry to continue their journeys. David began to feel like he was being watched and evaluated by the other customers, who seemed more interested in observing him than conducting their own business. Hit that like button if you're starting to recognize the warning signs of coordinated predatory behavior, because what David discovered about these customers proved that some hunting groups are sophisticated enough to create the illusion of normal activity while systematically targeting vulnerable travelers. David's unease increased when he realized the other customers were all men, ranging from their 20s to 50s, dressed in similar clothing that suggested they might be part of some group or organization. They weren't wearing uniforms exactly, but their clothing choices and grooming suggested coordination that was unusual for random travelers stopping at the same gas station. As David completed his fuel purchase and prepared to leave, one of the men approached and began asking questions about his travel plans and destination. The questions were invasive, inappropriate, clearly designed to gather information for harmful purposes. The man's demeanor was friendly but persistent, determined to engage David despite his obvious reluctance to provide personal information. David attempted to end the conversation and get back in his car, but the man continued following him and asking questions, while other men from around the station began moving closer to his vehicle. David realized he was being surrounded in a coordinated manner that suggested the men were working together to isolate and control him. The situation was developing exactly as Maria had experienced. multiple people positioning themselves to prevent escape while maintaining the pretense of friendly conversation. David's escape was facilitated by the arrival of a legitimate customer, a local rancher familiar with the area and the people who frequented the gas station. The rancher immediately recognized David was in trouble and intervened by loudly greeting David as if they were old friends and suggesting they travel together to their next destination. The rancher's presence disrupted the group's coordination and gave David the opportunity to get in his car and leave safely. The rancher followed David for several miles, then flagged him down to explain what had happened. According to the rancher, the gas station was known locally as a place where travelers sometimes disappeared, and the men who frequented it were suspected of involvement in human trafficking operations targeting young people traveling alone through remote areas. The rancher advised David to report the incident and avoid traveling alone through that area in the future. But even organized criminal groups and human trafficking operations seem almost rational compared to what Lisa discovered at a mountain gas station during a winter storm. Because sometimes the most terrifying encounters happen when you realize the people surrounding you aren't quite human anymore, or maybe they never were. Lisa was a real estate agent driving home from a property showing in rural Montana when a late winter snowstorm developed more quickly and intensely than weather forecasts had predicted. Visibility was severely limited. Roads were becoming increasingly dangerous as snow accumulated and temperatures dropped below freezing. Lisa's fuel was running low when she saw lights of a gas station emerging from swirling snow ahead. The station appeared open despite severe weather, and Lisa pulled in planning to fill her tank and wait for the storm to subside before continuing home. The station was located in a small mountain town, largely dependent on tourism and outdoor recreation, and Lisa expected to find other travelers who had also taken shelter. But when Lisa entered the convenience store to pay for gas and warm up, she discovered the station's atmosphere was unsettling in ways that had nothing to do with weather outside. The store was dimly lit and felt much colder inside than it should have, despite the heating system running constantly. The employee behind the counter was an elderly man who seemed confused and disoriented, responding to Lisa's questions with rambling, incoherent answers that suggested cognitive impairment. As Lisa waited for the storm to subside, she began noticing other customers who were also supposedly taking shelter. But these customers weren't behaving like normal travelers waiting out a storm. Instead, they were sitting motionless in the store's seating area, staring straight ahead with blank expressions and showing no interest in conversation, reading, or any activities people typically engage in while waiting. The customers appeared to be of various ages and backgrounds, but they all shared the same vacant, emotionless demeanor that made Lisa increasingly uncomfortable. Ring that notification bell if you've ever encountered people whose behavior was so fundamentally wrong that you questioned whether they were fully human, because what Lisa discovered about these customers challenged everything she thought she knew about the nature of human consciousness. Lisa's attempts to engage the other customers in conversation were met with silence or responses, so bizarre and disconnected from reality that she began questioning whether these people were mentally competent or under the influence of drugs. The customers would answer her questions with non-sequiturs or statements that made no logical sense, and their facial expressions never changed regardless of what Lisa said or did. Lisa began to feel like she was trapped with people who weren't quite human, or who had lost some essential aspect of their humanity that made normal social interaction impossible. The most disturbing aspect was the gradual realization that the other customers weren't actually travelers caught in the storm. Despite claims to be waiting for weather to improve, none showed signs of having recently been outside in snow and cold. Their clothing wasn't wet or snow-covered. They didn't have red cheeks and runny noses indicating recent exposure to freezing temperatures, and they didn't have travel gear or supplies expected from people making winter journeys through mountain areas. Lisa began to suspect the other customers were permanent residents, who came to the gas station for reasons having nothing to do with travel or purchasing supplies. Their behavior suggested they were using the station as a gathering place, but their vacant expressions and bizarre responses indicated whatever brought them together wasn't normal social interaction. Lisa started feeling like she'd stumbled into some kind of cult meeting or group therapy session for people with serious mental health issues. As the storm continued and Lisa remained trapped with the strange customers, she began noticing their behavior becoming more coordinated and focused on her presence. The customers started moving around the store in patterns designed to keep Lisa in the center of their group, and their vacant stares became more intense and focused on her specifically. Lisa realized her presence had triggered some kind of group response that was making the situation increasingly dangerous and unpredictable. Lisa's escape required waiting for a brief lull in the storm and then making a run for her car despite dangerous driving conditions. She drove away as quickly as safety allowed, choosing to risk hazardous roads rather than remain in the store with the disturbing group of customers. Lisa later learned the gas station had a reputation among local law enforcement as a gathering place for people with severe mental health issues and substance abuse problems, and that several travelers had reported similar unsettling experiences when stopping there during bad weather. These three accounts from gas stations across America reveal a disturbing truth about highway travel. The roadside stops we depend on for fuel, and shelter can become stages for encounters that challenge our understanding of safety and normalcy. Maria's encounter with an organized criminal group in New Mexico proved that some predators use gas stations as hunting grounds, coordinating attacks on vulnerable travelers with military precision. David's near miss with suspected human traffickers in rural Colorado demonstrated how sophisticated criminal operations can create the illusion of normal activity while systematically targeting victims for disappearance. Lisa's experience with a disturbing gathering of mentally unstable individuals in Montana showed that sometimes the most terrifying encounters happen when you realize the people surrounding you have lost something essential that makes them recognizably human. The most chilling aspect of these accounts isn't the criminal activities or mental instability, it's the realization that in each case, the victims had no way of knowing what they were facing until they were already trapped in situations where escape required quick thinking, decisive action, and sometimes pure luck. Maria had no warning that her routine fuel stop would put her in the crosshairs of an organized criminal group that had perfected the art of isolating and victimizing travelers. David had no indication that the other customers at the gas station were actually predators coordinating to trap him in a human trafficking operation. Lisa had no clue that the people taking shelter from the storm weren't fellow travelers, but something far more disturbing that defied rational explanation. If you're currently traveling alone on highways, if you've ever felt uncomfortable at a gas station, or if you've experienced that primitive instinct telling you to leave immediately despite needing fuel, trust your instincts. Hit that subscribe button if these stories have opened your eyes to dangers you never considered, and remember that the next time you're pumping gas in an unfamiliar location, you might want to pay attention to who's watching from the shadows. Drop a comment below if you've experienced anything that made you question the safety of a roadside stop, because sharing our experiences might be the only thing standing between other travelers and predators who view isolated gas stations as hunting grounds filled with vulnerable prey. The most important thing these stories teach us is that we're not alone in facing these hidden dangers, and that recognizing warning signs might be the difference between a routine fuel stop and becoming another missing person statistic. Before you go, check out the playlist in the description for more true highway horror stories that will make you see road trips in a completely different light. Because in the end, the most terrifying realization isn't that these things happened, it's that they're still happening right now at gas stations across the country to travelers who have no idea what they're really facing when they pull up to those fluorescent-lit pump islands in the middle of nowhere. Sweet dreams, and remember, the next time you're alone on a dark highway and that fuel gauge starts dropping toward empty, choose your stops carefully. Because sometimes the difference between making it home safely and disappearing forever is as simple as trusting that voice in your head that whispers, "Keep driving," when everything looks wrong, even if you can't explain why.